text this morning is Hebrews, the 10th chapter, 24-25. To put that into context, I'm going to go up to 21. Since we have a great priest over the house of God, then he goes through a series of let us. Let us draw near, since the heart is in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from the evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is faithful. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembly together, as the habit of some, but encourage one another, all the more as we see the day of dawn.
By the way, it's my mom's birthday, so if you can help me kind of keep that on the down low, not tell anybody. She doesn't like to draw attention to it, so I'd appreciate if you do that. No, I'm very grateful to my mom. I'm grateful she was born, because, I heard they're doing research lately that they say that they figured out that if your parents didn't have children, you probably won't either. It's some kind of genetic thing, I guess. So, but very seriously, I'm very grateful to her in so many ways. There was an article years ago that somebody wrote. I don't remember who wrote it. I just remember the title, but it was an article about church attendance and basically how we should do better at coming to the assembly. And I don't remember the writer or the article very well, but I remember the title, and the title was "Some Assembly Required." And I always thought it was a clever way of putting it. It brought back memories of toys. I bet you it does for you as well. You get excited to get the toy and you open it up. It says, "Some assembly required." Or worse, batteries not included. But some assembly required was kind of annoying. You mean I have to do something? I was just, planning on enjoying myself. I don't want to work for Mattel. I just want to enjoy their stuff. Which kind of indirectly ties in with the whole idea of how we feel about going to church sometimes. Just how much do I have to do? And by the way, if you're sitting where you are this morning and you're thinking, this is going to be about church attendance, if you're thinking that, you're exactly right. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. It's not an easy subject, but we're family, and family talks about stuff. But I want to make this as easy as possible, especially for me. So I'm going to start with the awkward part first and get that out of the way. You know best. You know best what you're able to do, what you're willing to do, and what your true motives are, and your true priorities. So does God. You and God know best. So when all of this is said and done, you and God know what your best response will be. In a way, it's between you and God. Part of everyone else's job is to give you the benefit of the doubt. There are no attendance police here. I've been at congregations, and this is probably not fair to them, but I have felt where there were attendance police, and it was not an official capacity. But I have to admit, any irritation on my part was probably because of my own guilt. I want to be upfront about that. But, somebody would come up to me and they'd say, "We missed you last Sunday." And I don't know, the inflection kind of just seemed a little suspicious. And like I say, it's probably my own guilt talking, but eventually, and I'm not proud of this, but fortunately we were kind of good friends. And half kidding, one time they came up and said, "We missed you last Sunday." And I said, "Well, you must not be a very good shot." And ironically enough, later we were in the parking lot and I almost bumped into him. And the next week I said, "I missed you last Sunday, just barely." So I get it. We all get it. To be on the receiving end of that can definitely be annoying, but that's not what's going on here. I can vouch for this particular congregation. When someone says, "We missed you last Sunday," it's the genuine version. It really is. Any annoyance on your part might be just the guilt talking, just so you're aware of that. So we might as well bring up the passage that everyone's already thinking of. That's why I asked Mike to go ahead and read this. Here's Hebrews 10:24. Hebrews 10:24. So let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Another translation puts it this way. I just want to shed as much light on this as possible. Let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works, not forsaking our own assembling together as the custom of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day drawing near. And it's worth pointing out that essentially it's saying don't ditch your brothers and sisters, but there's so much more to it than that. God tells us what to do. Be careful about forsaking the assembly, but he also goes on to tell us what we should do. He tells us what not to do. Don't forsake the assembly, but then he goes on, here's what you should do: encourage each other. We are here to worship God, but we're also here to encourage each other. And going to church can end up being pretty tricky. I could show up every time the doors are open and still not be here. I kind of hinted at that earlier. I'll be the first to admit there's been many times I have gone to church and I haven't worshiped or encouraged. My mind and heart were not present, and so I wasn't really worshiping. And when it was over, I didn't encourage anyone. I was kind of focused on myself, and so that part didn't happen. In fact, in my long history of going to church, the great majority of my time has fallen short of what God wants. For all of us, I think it's worth looking at this once in a while. There's no agenda here. This is just something that's kind of been on my mind, and some of the men have mentioned things in passing about this, so it's worth talking about once in a while. And all this leads to a very simple truth. If you're not here, you can't do either one of those: worship together or encourage other people. And so I was thinking about this, and I got to thinking it might help to consider who were the first Christians that read this passage that I just read. What was going to church like for them? It was a group of people who had seen Jesus come back, and he's alive again, and he told them, I'm leaving. Now you need to do what I was doing. I'm turning the job over to you. Essentially, Matthew 28, he's saying, get out there, teach people, baptize them, and make sure you represent me well. So these people, these Christians, would meet on the first day of the week. And of course, it's the same day where Jesus had come back to life, and it parallels Genesis beautifully. It's a new creation, first day of the week. These people had a purpose, and they would meet to worship God, to honor Jesus' sacrifice, and to encourage each other. Another important detail that I hadn't thought about much before, important detail about them, they were surrounded by great danger. If someone didn't show up, it could mean some pretty dark things. Maybe they were arrested or beaten or executed. When they showed up again, if someone said, we missed you last Sunday, that person didn't think, well, what's that supposed to mean? That's not what was happening. No one was saying, I'd like to point out that I'm better than you because I was here and you were not. The actual translation was, are you all right? Are you safe? And even more important, are you sound physically and spiritually? Our daughter Ippy, she's learning more and more words, and along the way she's kind of making up her own. We found out, when somebody's fallen or something, somebody bumps their head, we have a tendency to run up and say, you okay? And she thinks of it as one word, and so she's thinking, you okay? It's just one word. I think it's Y-O-K-A-Y. I think that's how you spell it. In the first century, Christians got together to worship God, but also to watch out for each other. But as time went by, being with the church became going to church, and it became more of a passive thing. You're well aware of history, that going to worship God has kind of become kind of a performance. Certain people did stuff, and then the audience watched them do it, and so it became easy just to come in, sit down, watch, try to stay awake, leave, rinse, repeat. And that's all it was. Going to church became less about being spiritually sound, less about trying to do better, more about just feeling better. The encouragement part, the effort to provide spiritual strength came from only one or a few people. Everyone else, the rest of us, our job was just to show up and try to pay attention. If anything, I think this subject is worth revisiting once in a while, just for the sake of one simple, basic Christian characteristic. Seek first the kingdom. Now, the kingdom is the church. So this verse essentially means the church comes first. Choosing to be at the assembly is one small opportunity to make that effort. And it's not always to do that every day, to put God first, to put your membership of the church first. But this is one clear way you can do it, is to make that decision, to not do this, but to be with Christians, as was mentioned by one of you at the end of class. It took me a long time to notice something that God expects from me whenever Christians get together, and that's encouragement. That quickly dismisses the whole misconception of what can this congregation do for me? What can you do to meet my needs? You know what your need is? Get busy encouraging people. If I'm walking in with that perception, I need to walk in again. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. There's just a couple of verses along these lines. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another, just as you also are doing. Now, it's not even talking about the assembly, but that's what Christians do, and it's important to do that. When I go to church, if I leave the building without someone, if I'm not building someone up before I leave, mission not accomplished. 1 Thessalonians 5:14, we urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone. If I'm coming in and I sit in the pew and I'm going to church and that's all I do, again, I'm not doing what God wants me to do. If somebody's not better off for me being here, I'm not sure I'm doing my job as any Christian. Galatians 6:2. This was brought up in class by one of you this morning. Bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. We bear each other's burdens. That takes some effort because first we got to find out each other's burdens. We have a tendency to kind of have a veneer over ourselves. Say, yeah, I'm fine, and try to, it's important to find out each other's burdens. It's like when you help somebody move. There's all this stuff that has to be carried, all these burdens. You need someone on the other end of the couch or the piano. I can't be the guy that just shows up and watch people doing all the work. And so what are you doing here? Well, I'm just here to hang out. I heard rumors of pizza. I'm not really helping to move or anything. I'm just here. For what it's worth, there have been many times I am very encouraged. I bet everybody here has felt the same, where you just look across the room. And for some reason, things are busy. They're talking to other people. You don't get to talk with them, but you saw them. And it was so encouraging. Say, oh, good. They're doing good. Okay. I know I can speak for the other men, as Chris mentioned before, too. It's very encouraging to look out. And, when you have the responsibility, as various men do, to get up here and present something, to have the encouragement of people opening their Bibles and being here and encouraging in that fashion. I got to say, it's already been mentioned, thank you, visitors. If there was just one of you, it's so nice to have the numbers, but if there was one of you, it made a difference. And I gotta specifically point out one, because I think they have the record. Just so you know, some of the young men and young women that I know from camp have made the decision to get together once in a while and go visit different congregations. They left La Junta at 5 this morning to be here. They won't brag. I'm going to brag on them. They didn't get up at 5. They left at 5. At least one of them stayed awake to drive, right? The whole way. He joked about tying his belt to the steering wheel, but I want to draw attention to that because there's all kinds of reasons. I bet my list is more creative than yours. There are all kinds of reasons to not be here, but you and I both know most of them are not very good ones. I appreciated James's lesson last Sunday night. He talked about, it's time to leave our excuses at home. That kind of stuck with me. And I think it also helps me to compare my reasons with the reasons the Christians in the first century might have missed the assembly. Where were you last Sunday? I was arrested. I was talking about the Bible and they took me in. Well, why weren't you here Wednesday? I was halfway here. Somebody tried to kill me, so I had to lay low for a while. Kind of embarrassing to imagine myself standing next to that and saying, I was tired. We all face obstacles, but sometimes the obstacles that defeat us can end up defining us. All of us need to remember it's so easy for the world to wear away what really matters. And going to church is one little way to fight in the resistance against that. As was mentioned, I appreciate it. And you say, okay, well, that's a Wednesday night. Can't do it. I'm going to be with Christians. I got to be upfront with you. I shared this in class several months ago, but I'll go ahead and tell you. When I was in college, I stopped going to class. I was still going to church. But the guy was, didn't really grab my attention. And there was I had my reasons. I don't even remember what they were. And I wasn't going anymore. I was going to church, but I didn't go to class anymore. And my dad came to visit. And I said, I don't go to class anymore. He just kind of went, what? He said, that's really all he had to say. I was like, oh, yeah, that's not a very good reason, is it? And that was it. And you know why he could do that? Because he's family. And being a Christian is like being a member of the family. I have to be more than a churchgoer. I'm not a churchgoer. I'm a member of the family. And when you realize this is being a part of the family, it explains so many things. If there's people at a congregation who annoy you and say, get up and say, go to church more, like I'm doing, welcome to the family. Families are annoying. If you didn't show up for Thanksgiving dinner and they said, well, where were you? Who are you to judge me? Doesn't fly, does it? In our family, sometimes we'll text each other. Did you get home okay? I don't know. Did you get home okay? That's not what this is. We check on each other because we know what's at stake. It's easy to think that our situation is different than in the first century. I was kind of putting this together and say, well, yeah, they had it much rougher, of course. They were surrounded by danger. No one here is going to get arrested or executed. No, they won't. All they might do is just fade quietly away and be lost forever. That's all. We are surrounded by great danger, maybe even more severe danger because it's gotten quieter. We need each other. You need me. I need you. I appreciate many times, one of my nephews, many times whenever he delivers a lesson, he always says, don't do it by yourself. We've got to rely on each other. It's important to remember what's at stake. To ask ourselves this, who am I checking on? Am I checking on anybody? Because that's part of what you signed up for when you became a Christian. It's your job to check on other Christians. Who's better off this week because of you? Who are you encouraging? And I love that word the more I found out about it. You know what it means? It means to give somebody courage. So you don't have any courage? Everybody got plenty of courage? So I don't have any courage. Okay, I got some courage. Here you go. That's what it means to encourage them. They walk away with courage. And I'm not talking about nice tie. See you next week. You don't get off that easy. Encouraging is going to require for us to get to know each other. And that's what I love about this congregation. We spend time together and we get to know each other. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes showing up as much as possible. And again, I want to refer back to point A. You know your situation. I'm too busy monitoring myself. But we need to be upfront about it. I got to go to Germany years ago. Some of you, I'm sure, have been there. Some of you have lived there. There's a place called Checkpoint Charlie. Some of you know about that place, and I had heard about it, but I didn't know much about it. Well, see, years ago, not that long ago, actually, in history, it was a very different Germany, and there was Berlin, most of which was free, but not all of it was, and there was a wall, which I'm sure you've heard of. But then in order to get from Berlin to the free world, you had to go through East Germany territory. And so if you were in the military, you would get in your Jeep, and you were driving to a safe place. But along the way, you were driving through enemy territory. And so they'd have these checkpoints along the way. They'd say, okay, I'm leaving now at this point. I'll be at checkpoint Alpha, and then at this time, and then I'll be at checkpoint Bravo, and then checkpoint Charlie, and so on until I'm safe. And the idea was they had a certain amount of time to cover a certain amount of distance, and if they didn't show up, something's wrong. And there would be contact. Are you okay? Is everything all right? Every week, Christians travel a week or a few days. And once in a while we get together. In fact, more than once. I'm sure you're well aware. We get together a couple of times on Sunday and once on Wednesday night. We get together and worship God. We also get together to make sure we're safe and sound. So you might think of being with Christians as checkpoint agape, if that helps. That's why we will often ask, like I'm doing right now, if there's anything that anyone needs, if you need to be baptized, if you need prayers. This is not just going through the motions. You're surrounded by people who care about you on the deepest level. Because part of what we're doing here is making sure everyone is okay. And if you keep missing checkpoints, don't get irritated at people who check on you. Get irritated at you. All of us have stuff to work on. It might be a matter of rethinking how much of a priority the assembly is. Again, that's in your court. It might be a matter of revisiting whether or not you're really here, which I have a tendency to do, to kind of be physically present but not mentally. It might be a matter of challenging yourself to make an effort to encourage people. When someone like me gets up and says stuff like I'm saying, I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm not being the attendance police. Just trying to make sure that we're making sure we're okay. Or like my daughter would say, you okay? I need you to make sure I am, and I'll try to do the same for you. Pray you'll think about it while we stand together and sing.